First on this Tuesday morning, breaking news, a July 4th provocation from North Korea. They claim to have launched their first intercontinental ballistic missile, as we refer to as an ICBM, overnight, perhaps a major step toward their goal of being able to hit the United States with a nuclear weapon. ABC's James Longman is in London covering this developing story for us this morning. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Paula. A stunning claim overnight. North Korea saying it successfully tested its first intercontinental ballistic missile. The announcement came on state TV early this morning, with a secretive regime releasing images it says are of the launch. Now, as usual, it's very difficult to know for sure what's going on in that country, but Japan confirmed overnight that the missile flew for about 40 minutes before landing in the ocean. If true, this would be the first time that North Korea has tested a missile that experts fear could potentially reach Alaska. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and other officials were shown celebrating the successful launch. And overnight, President Trump was tweeting about the test. He asked, does this guy have anything better to do with his life?
Russia and China say they've struck a joint position on North Korea after Pyongyang said it successfully tested an intercontinental ballistic missile for the first time. After a meeting in Moscow, President Putin said North Korea should declare a moratorium on nuclear and missile testing, but the US and South Korea had to stop military exercises. The Russian president said we agreed to actively develop our mutual initiative based on Russia's step-by-step plan for a Korean settlement and Chinese ideas, at the same time freezing the nuclear capabilities of North Korea and large-scale military exercises by the US and South Korea. Russia and China also called on the US to halt its deployment of an anti-missile shield to South Korea. The Chinese president said his visit was very productive and gave a new impulse to the development of Chinese-Russian cooperation and strategic partnership. The Chinese leader, who called into Moscow on his way to the G20 summit in Germany, was awarded a top Russian Medal of Honor by Vladimir Putin.
Multi-billion-dollar deals are on the table as China's leader Xi Jinping is right here in Moscow for an official two-day visit. The program for today has already kicked off, and RT's Murad Gazdiev has more on what's being discussed.
Yesterday was more of a casual affair, an informal meeting as well as a dinner. The real deal, though, is today. On the table are $12 billion worth of deals, as well as 20 bilateral documents covering too many things to mention. And Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, old hands at this. They've met more than 20 times, 6 times last year. This is their third meeting this year.
After all the fuss over the Trump administration's possible links to the Kremlin, the US and Russian presidents will finally come face to face. The two are to meet at the G20 summit in Hamburg this Friday. RT's Kate Partridge has more.
Well, this year's G20 summit promises to be very interesting indeed. The White House and the Kremlin have both confirmed that Presidents Trump and Putin will meet on the sidelines, though, after 6 months of Russia and Trump dominating the headlines and Moscow admitting that relations between the countries are at zero. However, it's much anticipated by other people that this will be the highlight of the entire summit. Well, what is it that they're going to be talking about? Well, first of all, there's Ukraine, and secondly, there's Syria, and that promises to be very thorny indeed after the White House came out with the unfounded allegation and indeed prediction that President Assad would use another chemical attack in Syria, an act which, I quote, Moscow said is an invitation for provocation.
It looks like President Donald Trump will use fast-growing supplies of U.S. natural gas as a political tool when he meets in Warsaw this week with leaders of a dozen countries that are captive to Russia for their energy needs. Reuters reports that Trump will tell the group that Washington wants to help allies by making it as easy as possible for U.S. companies to ship more liquefied natural gas, or LNG, to Central and Eastern Europe. Trump will attend the Three Seas Summit, so named because several of its members surround the Adriatic, Baltic, and Black Seas before the group of 20 leading economies meet in Germany. Among the aims of the Three Seas project is to expand regional energy infrastructure, including LNG import terminals and gas pipelines.
It appears that in the upcoming weeks, Russia plans to deploy the military to patrol the borders of the planned de-escalation zones in Syria. On Tuesday, Alexander Lavrentiev, a Russian negotiator, told reporters that when the agreement with Turkey and Iran is finalized, Moscow and its allies will be mapping conditions relating to the Idlib and southern zones. The borders in the Homs province and Damascus area have already been agreed on. Lavrentiev said overall the agreement provides for the presence of Russian military police in the buffer zones, but once again this matter has not been agreed yet. He continued, depending on when the documents on safe zones are signed, I think one should expect concrete measures on the deployment of forces within 2 to 3 weeks.
Syria's newest currency features a portrait of President Bashar al-Assad. The state-run Sana news agency reports 2,000-pound notes went into circulation Sunday, July 2nd, in several provinces, as well as the capital city of Damascus. Inflation is high and the value of the Syrian pound has been falling in recent years. At current exchange rates, 2,000 Syrian pounds are worth roughly $4 American. The war-torn country's central bank reportedly cited wear and tear on existing currency as the reason for the new note, which is the country's largest. This marks the first time Assad has appeared on Syrian money. One expert told the Washington Post that Assad is reasserting his authority by putting his face on the new bill. Assad's been in power for 17 years, the last 6 of which have been marked by unrest that evolved into civil war.
City in ruins and on the cusp of being freed from the Islamic State group. This is what remains of Mosul's old city. Once the jihadist stronghold, the very place where the group declared their caliphate 3 years ago, there are now only a few hundred of Islamic State fighters left. Iraqi officials said they should be able to declare victory by the end of the week.
Now we are almost 450 meters from the Tigris River. This is the IS group's last hideaway, the last 400 meters where they are present.
But the final push to take Iraq's second city is proving difficult. Booby-trapped buildings in densely populated winding streets of the old city. Suicide bombers hiding as fleeing civilians. Men, women, and children are asked to undress as they escape to make sure they're not carrying suicide belts. An Iraqi official said 7 women, all Islamist fighters, blew themselves up on Monday alone.
Most of the people who blew themselves up were women. The women suicide bombers detonated themselves near fleeing families. This is an evil and cowardly attempt by terrorists to inflict the greatest number of losses on civilians and security forces.
Even if Iraqi troops are on the verge of victory in Mosul, the battle against the Islamic State is far from over. While their presence is shrinking, the terrorist group still controls swathes of territory in Iraq and Syria.
As ISIL weakens, its future appears to be in doubt, and the whereabouts of its leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, are still unknown. It was reported in June that al-Baghdadi had died, with Russia saying it was highly likely that the leader was killed in an airstrike in May. However, there was no direct confirmation from ISIL itself, and the claim was questioned by the United States. Al-Baghdadi was last seen in public in 2014, declaring a caliphate at the El-Nuri Mosque in Mosul. Well, the landmark was blown up by jihadists before government forces seized the site last week. As ISIL-controlled areas shrink, some suspect the borderlands of Syria and Iraq as a body hideout if he is still alive. ISIL still claims the area as its land to rule.
The Philippines has given an update on the believed whereabouts of Abu Sayyaf leader Isnilon Hapilon. Philippine Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana said Monday, July 3, Hapilon is now believed to be hiding in a mosque in Marawi City. The Philippine military had been investigating reports just last week that Hapilon had fled Marawi. Hapilon's Abu Sayyaf group is linked to ISIS, and the Philippine military tried to capture Hapilon in Marawi City on May 23rd. The operation failed when ISIS-linked militants from the Maute group came to Hapilon's defense, seizing Marawi City. Davao Today reports the latest government estimates are that more 336 Maute members have been killed in the conflict, along with 84 Philippine troops and 39 civilians. Armed Forces of the Philippines Chief General Eduardo Año said Sunday the Maute group's territory in Marawi City is, quote, getting smaller.
Reuters has reported that top security officials warning on Tuesday that Germany should brace for further attacks given growing numbers of potential Islamist militants. Officials vowing to step up efforts to prosecute, convict, and deport suspects. Germany was hit by 5 Islamist attacks in 2016, including a December attack on a Berlin Christmas market that killed 12 people, while an additional 7 attacks failed or were thwarted. Citing growing evidence and over 1,000 expressions of concern from the general public about growing risks, Hans-Georg Maaßen, president of Germany's BFV, Domestic Intelligence Agency, told reporters, "We must expect further attacks by individuals or terror groups."
In a day of tensions within the EU, Italy has summoned Austria's ambassador. It comes as Vienna announced it was ready to deploy troops in the Tyrol region on the two countries' shared border to stop a potential influx of migrants. Other countries have threatened to shut their ports, including Italy. Rome says it may even impound aid agencies' rescue ships, as it warns the current number of migrants arriving on its shores is untenable. Tens of thousands have entered the country this year alone, most sailing in on overcrowded boats across the Mediterranean.
Canada will reportedly apologize and pay millions to a former Guantanamo Bay prisoner. Multiple outlets report Omar Khadr will receive more than 10 million Canadian dollars. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did not confirm the settlement when asked about it during a July 4th media availability, saying only that he thinks the judicial process is, quote, coming to its conclusion. Khadr was 15 years old when U.S. forces captured him in Afghanistan. He spent 10 years at the Guantanamo Bay military prison, eventually pleading guilty to murdering a U.S. soldier during a firefight. In 2010, the Canadian Supreme Court ruled Khadr was interrogated under, quote, oppressive circumstances. He later filed a $20 million wrongful imprisonment lawsuit. Khadr, who's now 36, was released in 2015 pending an appeal of his previous guilty plea. During an interview with the Toronto Star that same year, Khadr said he doesn't know if he threw the grenade that killed the U.S. soldier.
A pair of security alerts have shut down one of Europe's busiest airport terminals and Britain's 5th biggest railway station in central London. Terminal 3, the second busiest of the London Heathrow complex, has been evacuated following a fire alarm. London's Euston Station, which handles 41 million passengers a year, was also evacuated Tuesday amid a fire security alert, several reports have indicated. Reports of the Heathrow alarm first surfaced around 12:30 London time, with Heathrow's official Twitter account confirming the evacuation around 30 minutes later. Heathrow officials said investigations led to the conclusion that it was a false alarm.
Police in the German city of Hamburg are preparing for a potential security headache as leaders of the G20 gather on July the 7th. Authorities anticipate some 10,000 far-left activists will descend on Hamburg from across Europe. Kurdish and Turkish activists are also expected, adding to the volatile concoction. Hamburg will deploy some 15,000 police officers for the summit, with reinforcements due to arrive from other German regions. Peaceful protest is welcome and allowed in our democracy. Violent protest, however, cannot invoke the basic right of freedom to assemble, as written in our Constitution, and will be prevented. An additional 5,000 federal officers will also be on site to protect the heads of state and government and have been trained to deal with most eventualities.
It's only one word, but it's laden with meaning: friend. And according to Angela Merkel's new election manifesto, her party and the US are friends no more. When they unveiled their program, the Christian Democrats described the United States as Germany's most important partner outside Europe. In previous years, the country was Berlin's most important friend. The subtle change underscores the tense relations with President Donald Trump's White House. At a frosty meeting in the Oval Office in March, Trump declined to shake Merkel's hand. They've clashed over immigration and climate change, issues on the agenda when the pair will meet again this Thursday on the eve of the G20 summit in Hamburg. Speaking as she announced her manifesto, Merkel acknowledged their different worldviews may come to a head at the summit.
Regarding U.S. President Donald Trump, we're going to discuss a number of controversial questions during the G20 summit. Climate protection, trade. We know certain positions that the American government holds, and I don't expect that these positions will be abandoned.
Once the G20 is over, Merkel will return her focus to domestic issues ahead of the September vote, where she's expected to be re-elected for the 4th time.
French President Emmanuel Macron has settled into office and his party controls the legislative majority. Now, he wants to make sweeping changes to the parliament itself within a year. Macron called both chambers of parliament to the Chateau of Versailles to lay out key points of his agenda. He warned that if lawmakers failed to pass his reforms within a year, he'd call a referendum and let the French people decide. Macron said he wants to cut Parliament's membership by 1/3. At 925 seats, it's the world's 4th largest legislature. Despite French optimism polling fairly high, not everyone is on board with Macron's plans. Macron's speech was boycotted by members of 3 far-left parties who opposed Macron's plans to loosen labor regulations. Macron has also signaled he might roll back France's welfare system. At Versailles, he said every French person has a responsibility and a role to play in the conquest to come.
CNN has reported that Narendra Modi has become the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Israel, arriving in Tel Aviv on Tuesday as part of a 3-day visit to mark 25 years of diplomatic relations between the two nations. Commenting on social media ahead of his departure, Modi said he was looking forward to holding extensive talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, whom he called, quote, "my friend," who shares a commitment for vibrant India-Israel ties, end quote. Modi added, "From boosting economic ties to furthering people-to-people interactions, my Israel visit has a wide range of programs."
Iranians have organized a Trumpism cartoon contest in which hundreds of participants were invited to submit artwork mocking the U.S. leader. The same organizers held a Holocaust cartoon contest last year, which they said was meant to highlight Western double standards on free speech and not to cast doubt on the Nazi genocide. The logo for the contest is based on the Nazi emblem, with a diagonal T in a white circle against a red background. One cartoon shows President Donald Trump painting a Hitler-like mustache on the face of the Statue of Liberty. Hadi Assadi of Iran, who won first prize and a $1,500 award, said he wanted to highlight the money-mindedness and warmonger nature of Trump. His cartoon shows Trump wearing a jacket made of dollar notes while drooling on books, a reference to cultural material.
NBC has reported that the Trump administration urged a federal judge Monday night not to add more exceptions to the president's travel ban as sought by opponents who want to limit the ban's scope. Justice Department lawyers responded to a motion filed by the state of Hawaii and other challengers who argued that the government's plan for enforcing the executive order wrongly excluded grandparents and other relatives from the list of close family members who would still be able to get visas to travel to the United States during the 90 days while the executive order is in force. The government said the judge should stick with the definitions announced by the State Department on June 29th, which said parents, parents-in-law, spouses, fiancés, children, and children-in-law would be exempt from the ban on visas for travel from 6 majority Muslim countries: Syria, Iran, Yemen, Somalia, Sudan, and Libya. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews, and siblings-in-law would be subject to the ban.
On Tuesday, Ukrainian police seized the servers of an accounting software firm suspected of spreading a malware virus to computer systems at major companies around the world. The head of Ukraine's cyber police said that Ukraine's most popular accounting software had been seized as part of an investigation into the attack. Ukrainian intelligence officials and security firms have said some of the initial infections were spread via a malicious update. Ukraine also took steps on Tuesday to extend its state tax deadline by 1 month to help businesses hit by the malware assault.
China's latest sweeping crackdown on internet content has sent a chill through a diverse community of filmmakers, bloggers, media, and educators. According to Reuters, they fear their websites could be shut down as Beijing tightens its control over freedom of individual expression.
Over the past month, Chinese regulators have closed celebrity gossip websites, restricted what video people can post, and suspended online streaming, citing inappropriate content as their justification. On Friday, an industry association circulated new regulations that, effective immediately, at least 2 auditors will be required to check all audiovisual content posted online. That includes everything from films to micro-movies, documentaries, sports, educational material, and animation to ensure they adhere to core socialist values.
NBC News has reported that Oregon began issuing its new gender-neutral driver's licenses and state ID cards to enthusiastic applicants this week, while Washington, D.C. started to issue a similar driver's license featuring the letter X in the sex field where M or F usually go. Oregon is officially the first U.S. state to roll out the program. The Pacific Northwest state started preparing for the change to its state ID cards in 2016 after Portland resident Jamie Shoup became the nation's first person granted a gender change to non-binary by court order.
Andrew Snelling disagrees with most other geologists on the origin of the Grand Canyon.
It's a testimony not to billions of years, but to the biblical account of Earth history.
But now he'll get the chance to back up his claims with evidence. For a few years, Snelling has been trying to get permission to collect rocks in the park. But the park denied him a permit, and Snelling says it's because of his religious beliefs. So back in May, Snelling sued the federal government. The National Park Service has confirmed it issued a permit for Snelling's trip, and the lawsuit was dropped. In a press release, Snelling's lawyer thanked National Park Service officials, Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, and the Trump administration for no longer blocking access to data based on a researcher's religious faith.
For centuries, humans have been trying desperately to keep rats away from food, but the times they are a-changin'. Today, some people are not only okay with eating next to the rodents, but they are actually paying to do so. Customers packed San Francisco, California's Rat Cafe during its grand opening July 1st. There, people can enjoy their breakfast and play with domestic rats from the rat rescue group Ratty Rats. The furry company, however, doesn't come cheap. According to the pop-up cafe's press release, tickets cost $50. That includes a beverage, pastry, and 15 minutes to interact with the rodents. The unique dining experience is already proving to be a hit. Tickets for the first day completely sold out. So would you go?
At least 3 people have been injured after Typhoon Nanmadol slammed into Japan on Tuesday. The storm made landfall in Nagasaki. That's a city on the southwestern island of Kyushu, packing winds of up to 144 kilometers per hour and moving at a speed of 55 kilometers per hour. It is expected to cut across Japan and even affect areas surrounding the capital, Tokyo. At least 47 domestic flights have been canceled, affecting around 3,000 passengers. Local officials have advised more than 20,000 people to move to a safer place.
Severe flooding has killed dozens of people in southern China, and the death toll may continue to rise as many are still missing. China's Ministry of Civil Affairs said Tuesday, July 4th, that 56 people have died since heavy rain started pounding the country 5 days ago. Meanwhile, 22 people are still missing. The flooding, which has been concentrated in 11 provinces, has destroyed around 27,000 homes and damaged 37,000. The severe weather has also disrupted transportation, with several flights grounded and trains halted. Xinhua News Agency reports direct economic losses of more than $3.7 billion. On Monday, China's Ministry of Finance allocated $277 million in disaster relief funds. On Tuesday, the National Weather Observatory suspended a rainstorm alert. However, rain is still in the forecast for the southern part of the country.
The drought may have been broken in South Sudan, but the rainy season has brought its own risks. Thirsty refugees from the ongoing conflict are using dirty water, and the proximity of their cattle means doctors are warning a cholera outbreak could kill thousands. More than 2,500 cases have been confirmed since April, a sharp increase, and people are already weakened by famine. The few working hospitals are ill-prepared and facilities are stretched for the 200,000 refugees in UN camps. New solar-powered wells are being built, but the disease could rapidly spin out of control, and the camps already had to deal with cholera last year. In the last 12 months, the situation has hardly improved, and aid agencies note donations are down because of the political instability and continued fighting, including armed criminal gangs preying on the camps to steal what few resources they have.